So they say that the average college spends about 472,000 a year on marketing advertisements. The highest number they found was actually 3.5 million on advertising. So
Who was
this
that?
is they didn't mention the college. They just said it was the highest number they found.
Million.
Yeah, 3.5 million. So I'm wondering how that works too. They didn't get into this as much, but like I said before, colleges like Harvard, they're not going to spend as much on advertising because again, people will go to them. It's the same thing like Ferrari and the top restaurants and all that. They're not going to put out ads because people know who they are. People are going to go there, so there's less incentive to reach out to people. Whereas if you're a lesser known school, you have to make the appeal to get people to go there.
Okay.
And this is sort of like the point I made about the administrators last time about we can debate how much should a college spend, but bear in mind that the amount they do spend, that will take away from other things. So again, you spend 3.5 million on advertising. Well, how much tuition could you afford using that money? How many new professors could you afford? How many new administrators, depending what you want? So it's at least bearing in mind that this does take away from other things as well.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, would they count people flying around in private jets to go to certain fairs at exclusive locations to be some cost? So maybe even if you have something like Harvard where they're not necessarily doing it that much, or these Ivy League schools, I keep using Harvard, but that goes to what you're saying.
Yeah.
When people talk about top schools, Harvard doesn't need to constantly advertise because you'll have jamokes like us constantly name dropping that when there's 8 other Ivy League schools. But so maybe you can have some of those schools where they might not do it as frequently as another school, but the few times they do it, it's so expensive. Like, oh, we're taking out our top provosts or people, and then they need to go on a private jet to the Middle East for some conference in there. And then that whole trip itself cost maybe $50,000 just for that one trip. Then that could maybe account for something being that high, because you're doing few of those, but it's each of those advertising trips is a lot higher than a local university going to like taking the public transport bus to the local high school. Yeah. I don't know.
But again, that would probably be classified as like traveling and expenses or something. Versus this, they're actually putting out advertisements and things like that. Like I was starting to say, like with restaurants, like Danielle or the French Laundry that we did the video on, they're not going to put out ads because those are world-class restaurants. People come from all over to go there. So it's a waste of their money to put out ads trying to bring more people there. And again, it's the same thing with the cars. Like Ferrari's not going to advertise because they're a world-famous brand that expensive, that people with money will buy their expensive cars. So it's not worth it to them to put out their names. Like they may have an ad here and there, but it's like they're not going to make a serious effort. And then back to restaurants, it's the same thing. Like you can have a great young up and coming chef who's unknown who will advertise a lot because they want to get noticed. But if they already have the big name, what's the point?
Okay, so now I'm trying because this is really. I think what I'm saying, like you said, it definitely depends on how you define the advertising. Yeah. Now, another kind of way I'm thinking is what are the biggest advertising type of times? I'm thinking maybe in sporting events and things like that. So maybe there's a kind of thing where they might say like a certain university involved maybe during the college football playoffs or the Super Bowl. Is there a way to put like an advert where the entire conference is advertising somehow, and then once you put that advertising, because what could, if it's just classical advertising as in newspapers, online spaces, paying ads on Facebook and Twitter and social media platforms, Google ads and things like that. And then I guess television spots. I don't see how one university can spend 3.5 in one calendar year, unless they're fudging the books. It just seems odd. Yeah. But yeah. All right.
So anyway, this next section they talk about the liberal arts, and of course you hear similar lines about liberal arts about, oh, this is a transformative experience, that liberal arts education will train you how to be a leader of tomorrow, all this. And most colleges actually admit that liberal arts don't train anyone for an actual job. The word transform gets used a lot in a lot of these advertisements, and colleges often say they will help students improve these skills. Others say they will instill these skills. Any comments on that?
I think I figured it out. It could be the arts institutes, those kind of places, because they do a lot of advertising. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of advertising with those schools, and they charge a lot of money for what you're actually getting for the kind of teacher that go there. I've been to an art institute. That's part of my background. It was like the Institute of European Design. It was a good school. But the teachers are great. They're still in contact with some of the teachers. There were artists in their own right, working in the field, working in the market. So I don't think they were being paid as much as we discussed in the previous discussion that we had. This I'm talking about. What was it? 100 for the full-time professors was something like $150,000 on average in the United States of America, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Harvard was like 220,000.
Yeah. So I doubt that my professors in Turin were being paid anywhere close to that kind of money for the teaching that they were doing. So you have those arts institutes where they might be high initial costs to start the company, get the computers, get the programs, but the running costs of them are not that high, and the turnaround. You have these 1-year programs, 2-year programs, people coming in, a lot of students, a lot of professionals who want to get there to do some extra work. And I see a lot of advertising, and this is just some rumors. There's been some coverage about some of these things, how they could be some money laundering involvement with some of those arts institutes type of institutions. So that could be where this 3.5 million is there. If anybody else is watching this and listening to this and has heard who would be spending this high, give us your ideas on where you think that spending could be. Okay.
Well, where I went to culinary school, it gets more complicated because you think about it, they have to pay for all those ingredients, which will expire, and they have to use in a certain amount of time. But the other side of that is that they have restaurants that are open to the public that students have to work in as part of the program. So students are paying to work in those restaurants, and they're making money from those. Now, of course, officially they say the school is nonprofit, but I don't buy that for a second. Apparently now they have a brewery and other things. So, and also at CIA, it's a bit different. I think the structure is different now, but they used to have a block structure where it's like new students start every 3 weeks and then go to a new class. So it's you take this class for 3 weeks, you go to your next class, you take that class 3 weeks, next class, and on and on. So as students are essentially being rotated in and out. So there aren't a lot of students on campus at one time, but as far as the number of people that go through there, it's pretty high because you figure new people start and graduate every 3 weeks. So it's not like a typical school where it's all these people start 6 months, it's another 6 months, and then after 4 years graduate. No, it's every 3 weeks. So, and then factor in that there are dropouts and other things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't get your money back after you've paid.
No.
Even especially a lot of the people who join these universities will be with the financial aid. That's what I'm saying. There's money laundering is not. It's not just a nefarious kind of nature where it's like, oh, we're going to get these people from the mafia coming in and laundering their money through it. They could be money laundering schemes, or I don't know if this counts as money laundering necessarily. I guess if you count taxation as extortion, then that's kind of a crime. but
there's tax shelters and stuff. Like, for example, I've heard that like that's why hedge funds will invest in restaurants and other things because they find ways to sort of like put some of their money in there. Then if it gets converted to cash and then cash transactions, then that doesn't get taxed. And there's some complicated thing with that. I don't fully understand it, but those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think what I'm thinking about might be more tax fraud, if anything. Maybe, because they will accept students in that they know from their own figures are riskier, that are not actually going to graduate or not going to spend the entire time there. Yeah. So they'll let those people in, but then the financial aid will be released to the school, whether that kid comes to one class or not. The school still gets to pocket that money. Yeah. Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay.